Welcome, everyone, to this week's installment of Inside Today's Boardrooms. I'm Lisa Edwards, Executive Chair of Diligent Institute, and your guest host for today. Today, we have with us a very familiar face, TK Kerstetter, who occasionally likes to get in front of the camera and talk a little bit more than he's allowed to as host. So we have him here today to share his 25 years of guidance and experience with helping boards and running over 725 episodes of Inside Today's Boardroom. And we've asked him to put together his 10 commandments for boards. So TK, I'll let you take it away from here. Give us your 10 commandments, starting with your first three. What do you think all boards should pay attention to?
Well, first of all, Lisa, if I knew that my whining would have get me more airtime, I probably would have whined earlier, okay? But, so, yeah, I thought it might be good for me to sort of look back and say, if I had to create a 10 commandments for corporate directors, what would those 10 commandments be? So the first three. First one is remember your core legal duties. And you know that if you're invited in by the Delaware court because somebody decided to sue directors, the two basic foundations of duties that you have is the duty of loyalty and the duty of care. Duty of loyalty says you won't put your interest ahead of the interest of the shareholders, and duty of care says that you'll be well informed and do the due diligence and whatever. Much more complex than that, but that's really the idea. So that's certainly core to what you need to remember. You have to also need to remember what happens in the boardroom stays in the boardroom. Confidentiality is extremely important. And one thing that doesn't seem like it sort of fits here, but it does if you ever end in court, and that is pay attention to the board minutes, okay? Because the board minutes can save your butt, okay? And it's not as easy as that because you don't want them to be too short, you don't want them to be too long, but you need to make sure that it is a representation of what you spent time on, because that may be the only record of your actions, you know, if you get into any kind of legal situation. So that would be one. So two is make sure your board house is in order. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that there's certain things that you have to make sure are settled and then out of the way. D&O insurance is one of those, okay? You need to be concerned about that. That's all set and in place. And particularly you have to worry about side A if you're an individual, okay? Don't have time to go into what that is. Just remember side A is very important to you as an individual. Obviously, indemnification has to be set up within your charter and within your organization. That's an important one. Be knowledgeable of all the compliance issues you have. You have things like disclosures. You have FCDA, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. You have things like that that you need to be aware of, conflict of interest, another part about getting your house in order. And the last one, an important one, is insider trading. Know how insider trading, you don't want to be that board or that person that's on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. So understand how those rules work because obviously very important. Okay, so third is be especially diligent overseeing risk management, internal controls, and financial reporting. And I shouldn't have to explain the risk management. It is a core duty. It is what everything seems to revolve around. Risk is not a bad word, okay? Because you have to take risks to have some rewards. But those areas are especially true for getting yourself into a jam. I can't stress enough how important it is to have a risk management program that everybody is on top of and understand and set that risk strategy that you want to have for your organization. So those are the first three.
I love it. And I especially love starting with the basics on duty of loyalty, duty of care, because it's so important for every board to pay attention to those things. So, all right, give us three more. What do you got next?
Okay, the next is embracing the board-shareholder relationship. Now, I'm going to have some people reach back and say, hey, how come you didn't say stakeholder, okay? I'll touch on stakeholder, in a moment, but this is still a very critical role. It's you and the relationship with the shareholder. That's what the Delaware courts worry about, okay, in the end. And here's the challenge. You've been elected by the shareholders. You are asked to represent the shareholders. Yet the shareholders are this fluid mix of unrelated people with unrelated interests, Okay, so it's difficult to represent, that person that has 100 shares and that activist that has, 5 million shares. But that's the role that you play. And so you need to remember that you have that responsibility. That takes you back to one, duty of loyalty and duty of care. The other thing I will say about them, first of all, don't ever forget that you represent shareholders. But the other thing I'll say is don't be afraid to meet with the shareholders, because you can gain a lot from them. And you represent them. It only makes sense to me that you devote some time to understanding what their issues are on that side. Okay, next, managing major constituencies. So here's where I'll touch on the stakeholder, okay? So first of all, to me, as I was brought up, and admittedly, it was a long time ago in this board space, there is a balance between the shareholders, or what I'll call the financial, the employees, and the customers. And it's the board's job to rise above the trees and make sure that's in balance. If you get any one of those three constituencies out of whack, like you don't pay your people and have turnover, or you have poor customer service, or you don't give the shareholders their increased wealth, it throws things out of whack. Well, remembering to rise above, remembering to look at that balance is important. Now we add in the things that are ESG, okay? The vendor, the society issues, whatever. But we've seen that there's been a lot of consternation around ESG. I like to call it sustainability, only because so many people get lost in the debates about ESG. To me, it makes perfect sense to be sustainable. So, long answer to number 5. Number 6, okay, evaluate performance and plan succession. Okay, obviously, key role for the board, hire and retain the CEO. Get the best one you can, whatever. That succession plan has to start the day that you bring in a new CEO. Sit down with them, give them your expectations of what you expect of them. And one expectation is continue to help build other people behind them, that could be a potential replacement. Now, the other thing you have to remember is you not only have the responsibility of CEO succession, you have the responsibility of board succession. So that nominating committee has to think about who's going to be chairs of the future. How's that going to work? Okay, who do I have coming in that can do that? If you don't have anybody who can be the audit chair, that's a problem. Today, comp chair is a problem, okay? There isn't many good spots where the chair of a committee is not going to have plenty of work. So remember not only the CEO succession, but the board succession.
I like that, and I like the notion of your first on risk, and then when you think about sustainability or ESG, if you think of some of those factors as a business risk, then it becomes very relevant. Okay, last 4 in a lightning round, because we have short filming windows, as I've learned from the best. So hit us with your last 4.
Okay, so 7 is recruit, set expectations, support, reward, retain the best CEO, okay? We talked about that in the last one. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this. Critical issue, though, is setting up that comp plan, setting up executive compensation for the whole C-suite and what's happened. That mandates that you have, in today's world, a smart comp chair, okay? So we'll just leave it at that because we talked about that. Okay, 8, ensure that you have effective board leadership. I see evaluations all the time. What I don't see, and what I say would be a shortfall over my 25 years, is having the tough conversations with directors that should be replaced. Think about how important refreshment's going to be in the future. We have people on the board that are senior, my age. We never had digital transformation when we were in the leadership role. We never had cyber, and we sure as heck never had AI, okay? So with AI coming, you're going to need people on the board that have knowledge in this space. If you look at your board and you don't have anybody that can ask the right questions there, you need refreshment. So refreshment is one of the key issues on here. Pay attention to your role in corporate direction and in culture. I say corporate direction because back to the Delaware courts, one of the things they're going to look at is have you participated and signed off on the strategic plans, the budgets, and all that stuff. If the answer is no, I'm afraid that moves you into the negligent part, and the business judgment rule isn't going to protect you in that side. So that's a very important thing to do. Culture, not so easy. Okay, first of all, my era, that was a soft issue. People didn't like soft issues. It's not a soft issue today. Everybody talks about culture today. But the board will have what I call watershed moments where they will make decisions that will drive culture more than anything they say. Okay, so use those watershed moments very carefully. Perfect example. If somebody was the top salesperson in a company, but they cut corners to get there, and you reward them, and everybody in the company knows that they still got rewarded, you set some of the culture right there. So perfect example. Lastly, okay, here we go. Do the right thing. Okay, how simple is that really? You know, and you're gonna know in your gut whether this is the right thing. Don't be swayed by the movement of some powerful people on the board that, you know, this is okay. We've seen that. My favorite is sort of the Theranos, you know, situation, but we've seen it with WorldCom and Enron and whatever. You have to have enough courage to do the right thing. So there you have it, 1 to 10 TKs, 10 commandments for corporate directors, and feels good to get it out.
I love it. I love it. And, you know, you've seen and talked to thousands, literally, of board directors. And, you know, so compiling that down into 10, I imagine, was really difficult. So we thank you for pulling that together. And that wraps us for this week's show. I want to make sure that we tell you to tune in for next week's show because we have a surprise for you all. Next week will be TK's last show. And I am very sad about that, but I'm very happy to be telling you that he will continue to be involved with Diligent, and I will be taking over as host of Inside Today's Boardrooms. So you have more to look forward for from me, and I'm sure that we were going to bring you back as a guest multiple times again because we love to get this kind of wisdom from you.
Well, thanks for, again, letting me move to this side and be on air more. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Happy to take the baton. That's it, everybody. Thank you.